The other thing that I appreciate coming to Church of the Highlands, I have an incredible church, Celebration Church in Austin, Texas. But man, when I come here, it almost feels like a different level. Don't tell Pastor Joe I said that. But man, I'm telling you, I get to grow here. How many of y'all are ready to grow into 2025? We have a great opportunity. And you know, as we continue to build on 9 years, it's incredible to think about what has happened through the years, because as we sat with just a couple of us back in 2015, 16, 17, 18, invited some nonprofit leaders in. Can I tell you that that year was the most awkward thing I'd ever been a part of? I'm serious. We had organizations in the room that had never been in the room together before. And it was like, what are we doing? But what did it do? It broke down walls. It broke down and gave people the opportunity to begin connections, right? To collaborate on with like-minded people. That's a big deal. How many need leaders in their life? I do. I need Dennis in my life. I need Pastor Lane in my life. I need Caleb in my life, and Chris, and this family has just really poured into me, and I know Joe could say the same thing. We're going to move into a session, and this is going to be, it's either going to be a win or it's going to be a fall. So it's going to be up to you, okay? So we're going to have some discussion. I'm going to need help, Joe, probably 2 microphones to work the room. But the idea of this session is really to go into updates and feedback. That's not me and ServSource giving you the updates and feedback. It's us asking you, what happened this year? Who did you meet? What did you do? What are some of the resources that you found? What are relationships that you built out there? What did you learn about trucking? What did you learn about feeding people and actually setting a plate that is blessing people, right? And what are the things that God is speaking to you this year? Dennis just poured his heart out for us. And I so appreciate that, because it lets me know that I'm on the same track. Like, I'm on track. How many felt that message this morning? We're gonna have Mike Walker share in a little bit today. And guys, I'm telling you, like, God is moving in a way that is incredible through our nation and around the world. How many do international ministry? He's moving around the world. It's not just here in our states, right? And so as we start this session today, communication, updates, and feedback, I have a couple questions listed, and we're going to have a couple of mics moving around the room. But can we just start with, what's one thing that you learned this year? What is one bit of feedback that you could give us as an organization that you learned this year? What's that one thing that stood out to you? Like I said, it's either going to be a flop or fun. The major lesson learned. Anybody, Topper, what'd you learn this year? Come on, I'm going to start calling people out, because that's what we do with family.
I was kind of waiting until there was a rhythm, because I got something to say, but I'm not sure if you wanted me to start with it.
Hey, and what did he say? Feedback hurts, but it helps you grow.
No, it isn't.
So you can talk about
it
me
isn't
too.
about
I don't care.
You or this, really, but it was an observation. So I've maybe realized that most of the experience that I have is in wind and water related disasters. So knowing that, I'm like, okay, there are these things called fires. And we just saw a huge one, right? It was publicized very well. There's probably many larger fires that happened, but it has stood out to me. I need to know more about this. And most of the fires are happening in the West, although that's changing. So I've been building a relationship with the woman who leads an organization called After the Fire. It's based in Sonoma, and she has an invite-only summit every year. And I was invited, so I thought I'd better go. And there was a room about this size with about as many people in it. And they are all heavy hitters, right? They're all leaders of multi-million, multi-billion-dollar organizations or companies. And what stood out to me was none of them were faith-based, and I would assume that most people didn't know Jesus. I picked out a few people that I thought maybe, right? But what is worth mentioning to me, the reason I'm telling all that context, is they don't know y'all exist. Completely off the radar. There's no accommodation made for, well, what about the Christians? Or what about the organizations that come in and do this kind of, it's only them. And I think that we can also be guilty of not knowing they exist, right? So then you have essentially two different pathways that are running parallel. And what I've been thinking about since attending that is, okay, how do you build the bridges? Like, I could see why we would care, right? They have a lot of money, there's a lot of need. Why would they care? How can I get them to be interested in those wacky people who believe in strange things and maybe get in the way, right? Like, I've been tripping over that. And I haven't come up with an answer, but I'm here to say there's a whole other world out there that doesn't know about you.
There absolutely is. Who can speak to that point? Because I know there's many in here that work with BOADs, that work with different orgs. You want to share?
Okay, and so 8 Days of Hope, second year of mass feeding. We're working with churches and hoping to partner with the churches and equip them. So we have lots of volunteers coming in. Had a gentleman come to volunteer. I said, okay, go to the cars, give them a meal, ask them if they want to pray. He said, I'm not comfortable with that. And I just assumed that people coming knew Jesus and were wanting to share. So I think I missed that opportunity to share with that volunteer. So again, it's good people out there everywhere, but they don't all know Jesus.
So a couple of things we're missing the mark on, right? I know our Mercy Chefs has a lot of interaction. Samaritan's Purse has a lot of interaction with interdenominations or even just the secular world, right? And so can I tell y'all something that's kind of funny to me? ServSource was asked by 3 different members of the Texas BOAD to fill out the paperwork. I finally did it, went through a process. It took about a year for them to communicate with me, had meetings with different people, and then I got a letter of rejection because we weren't inclusive enough. And I'm like, really? So, and I've heard Gary, you've mentioned, hey, if I wanted to be a part of another BOAD, I probably wouldn't be sitting in this room, And so that's a pain point. That's a challenge. How do we walk the same path? How do we interact? Team Rubicon, we've got a good relationship. We talk whenever things happen. Do we share each other's information all the time? No, because we don't do exactly the same thing. I mean, we're unapologetically kingdom focused, but not to the point of, hey, we're so kingdom focused, if you don't love Jesus, we're not helping you, right? That's not the thing, right? So what's our other values? And Dennis, you probably going to hit this later, but tomorrow, but I'm going to hit them anyway real quick, just you'll remember. But if we're kingdom focused and we believe in making the local church the hero, does that scare people off at times? Yeah. Anybody else? Shane?
Well, I'm searching the same way, right? We rush into the storm. That initial response is so important. And then we look towards that long-term recovery. And I've just come to the conclusion that if we had to catch up with disaster relief, we'd have to go 15 years backwards, unfortunately. So for me, I've just eliminated the word recovery. And I've just replaced it with long-term relationship. We're in Chimney Rock, North Carolina right now. We've been there since 3 days after the storm, and we're still there. And we're going to rebuild this town. But the relationship is in the long term. Although it's important and a necessity to be there for 2 weeks to feed and whatever that looks like. But we have to find a way. If God says he'll never leave us or forsake us, and we are the model of Jesus, we can't leave them. We have to find a collective way of this organization, of this group, to where we find that way to stay with them and finish, just like Jesus did to finish work on the cross. And that's where the sweat equity allows us just to speak into them.
Amen. That's one of the things that I picked up on this year as well. There's a lot of rebuilding programs out there through you. How many of y'all do some type of rebuild, long-term recovery? Okay, look around the room. If you haven't connected, make sure you do. I know Joey. Where's Joey? Yeah, where you at? Oh, there he is. Talking about just even the opportunity to do prefab units and possibly build them at, in other cities and send them in to be able to rebuild quickly with the local volunteers or local organizations. It's incredible. How can we do that better together, right? It's been a talking point all year. Like, how can we help support the communication of people who do that? How can we help find some lumber or whatever it looks like? Like, who are the people out there? And so that's another thing. Anybody else? What's another big thing that just stuck out to you this year?
One of the things I saw this year was, and this is only my second year attending this roundtable, my second year using ServSource, but the amount of communications that I saw last year of us sharing information and posting, reaching out to each other was higher, and I think that's an amazing thing. This is an amazing tool in our toolbox. So I was really encouraged by the amount of posting and communications with each other that I saw last year.
Now, one of the things that we do find is that a lot of communication happens outside of that thread even, right? At times, and we'll talk in other sessions about how different groups are sent out to pastors in certain areas of the country, things like that. But it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. Every time we come into this conference, I'm like, oh, dear God, we have nothing. Like, we have nothing. But then I go, oh, but my family's coming, so now we got stuff, right? And so we're going to continue pushing in. We have other people that are now helping in an area that, like, our brains don't work, like code in the background to make certain things populate and all those good things. So thank you so much. What is your name and organization again for everybody?
I'm Joe Clare with Hope Force International.
Hope Force. Perfect. Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, Chris Zitzman with Christ in Action. Kind of circling back to Topper's question of, outside groups that potentially have resources and or needs. I think that, for example, you brought up VOADs, Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. So one of the things that I noticed with Helene was that, there was a lot of good communication on needs and resources. So that was able to facilitate, as we were driving and assessing different states, being able to put some needs out there that we came across that we might not have been able to meet in the moment or were not of the right size and fit, to put that out to some of the other groups and some church teams that were able to come in. But also then some of the needs that I was able to put out were coming from other outside groups that we were plugged into, for example, the North Carolina State VOAD. And so, I'm not going to have all the answers, but what if, if we were that bridge for the North Carolina VOAD, kind of feeding resources and needs to this network, Topper, maybe God's going to use you as that link and bridge to that group. Oh, no, God's already called you. I love you. It's just a thought because I saw that as working well. I don't know.
Hey, I'm going to jump onto this just because I had an opportunity this year to participate in an international disaster response network meeting led by somebody who's here, Matt Wallace. So I wanted him to speak to this real quick.
My name's Matt Wallace, International Disaster Response Network, and the very thing you were talking about, sir, I think your name's Topper, is what we're trying to attempt to do. I mean, we want to create a network that allows networks to network with one another. We're focused on awareness, just making you aware of it. We're not going to try to coordinate you. We're not trying to change you. We want to make you aware of who else is out there. So those big guys know about you, you know about them, and then we focus on best practices and collaboration. We don't try to force anybody to collaborate, but you can't collaborate if you don't know they exist. And best practices, we're not going to tell you have to do it that way, but if we can make people aware of best practices, we trust that they'll say, hey, that's how we should have done that. And so the entire focus of what you said is what we're trying to do. We're trying to retrofit an existing disaster network that was created in 2007 and change its focus specifically to this area of awareness that will be the best on-ramp for every one of you, that we want the world to be able to find you quickly if they're looking for you and help people know who's doing what and what resources are available. Not do anything else other than that. So I would love to talk with you if you're interested in that. I think that's it.
I love it. Where's Evan Cox? Are you still in here? Evan's been working. How many of y'all know Evan? He's awesome. He was at one of our first roundtables and with JMM, Joyce Meyer's ministry, and has moved into Evan Cox Consulting, which he's helping us kind of reimagine our website to make it easier for everybody. And so one of the things that we're really working on is how do we clarify and make the opportunity for us to kind of have a protected space, right? So if you're an organization and you log in, you'll be able to go, when you log in, you'll be able to see resources. I believe that's one of the greatest resources that we could have listed is the different links to show us what is happening, right? I don't know that we would dive into that area forever, but now we can, right? So we can bridge that, connect the dots, as Joe says, to be able to help everybody understand the big picture. And so there's many, many opportunities to be able to partner, to lock arms, to do things. I mean, it's not a stiff arm that we're trying to do, right, Topper? Sometimes we can get laser focused, and so can they. And sometimes it's like, man, it just doesn't feel. It's like, how do we work through that? How do we grow through that? And how do we show that, man, here comes a force, right? And by the way, we love Jesus, but we've seen it over and over again that the faith-based organizations are really coming in very strong, and so maybe they need a connection.
Hey, so I wanted to speak to this quickly, Derick, because it's something I need to demonstrate in the room. Some states are a little bit different than others, and we all know that the culture is different in each state, and philosophy and political views, all of those things that play into people's decision-making processes, and even relationships many times can play into that. But I think as a healthy organization, even what Lane spoke about we never have to be afraid of who we are and what we represent. But as we step to those governmental organizations, we also have to respect the position that they hold as we work with them and cooperate with them. It doesn't mean that we say yes to everything all the time. And so I've got some of my friends in the room. So Matt, if you'll raise your hand. So Matt works for the county EMA here in Jefferson County. And Melinda, where are you at, Melinda? So Melinda's up here on the hill. She works for the governor's office here in the state. Jeff Smitherman, my mouth don't want to work today. I preached too much this morning. Jeff will be with us tomorrow, who's the state EMA director. And we have a great relationship with these guys. And I hear from them and talk to them all the time. They know that we're a church and know what we represent and know that at the end of the day, we're all about bringing hope to people in the name of Jesus. But I look for ways to say yes, not ways to say no. And so I look for those opportunities that we can step in and we can serve. And I think that's kind of where it kind of boils down to. There are some areas that I can't say yes to. And but those become many times very minimal as the areas that I can say yes to. And so So I think in those relationships that we're looking for in those areas and how we interact in those places, at the end of the day, us serving and having a heart of serving and stepping into those spaces will break down any of those barriers that we face many times and create a level of influence that we really need in those spaces. So the more you say yes, increases your capacity of influence so that when there are needs or areas that you can find favor in, they're going to look to you as an organization or a group as a part of their plan, not a part of their nemesis, so to speak. So does that make sense?
My name is Chris Gibson, and I represent World Renew Disaster Response Services. I love the word unapologetically faith-based. We are Christian in every capacity, and we see the service we offer as really an act of worship and gratitude for what God has done. I also want to say amen to looking for ways to say yes. Our organization interacts with state-level VOEDs, the national VOED. One of the most amazing honors is when a county emergency manager calls and says, "Can you help?" And we will do everything that we can to say yes to that. We just greatly appreciate that. And never once has anybody in any of those organizations that are not faith-based, never once have they told me I can't talk. You know what I mean? I can't share my faith. We do that, and we find that the people that we go to serve often are the ones sharing their faith with us, that you are God's answer to our prayer for help. So thank you very much.
I love that also. Hey, John, can you take the mic over there? I'm sorry to pick on you. John LeBeau from Minuteman. You know, we've had many conversations, and I love the way that Minuteman approaches a new area, right? They call us, other people, and just start finding out, hey, who's down there? Who can we connect to? What's the lay of the land, right? So you had called during for the LA fires, and can you share a little bit about what you did or what that experience might have meant? You know, because y'all ended up sending a truck down there, a couple guys fill it out, you know? And so what does that look like, and what is your approach as you go into a new city? Because one thing I know about Minuteman, they almost look like firefighters or first responders, right? And so they got to come in, right? And so tell us a little bit about the process.
Okay, first of all, we're not first responders. Not going to happen, never going to be there. We're not that skilled anywhere near. What Minuteman does before we go into an area, we understand that's not our sandbox. That's someone else's sandbox. We want to play in your sandbox. What are your rules? Okay, California is going to be different than anyone else out there. We know that. Eric Burks, he and I are assistant executive directors over at Minuteman. We talked about going out to California. So, well, how can we get out there? How can we do it? I called Derick. We started figuring out some stuff. We had some N95 masks, about 40,000 of them. Eric, along with Al Hope, our logistics guy, we figured out a way to drive some of our trucks out there, get some of our volunteers to go out there and deliver those masks to a church. Okay. At the same time, we had one of our supporters called True Labs. They donated some powdered hydrate. We took a huge pallet of that, about 40,000 of those, and did the same thing with that. The whole thing is we went out there with our hat in our hand. Okay, we go out there and say, how can we help? What can we do? Trying to learn how to play in that sandbox. Because we've never been out to California. California's a totally different sandbox. I mean, there was only two groups that were approved to work out there, Samaritan's Purse, and then I think the Texas Baptist Men, okay? Okay, they can do what they can do, but it's gonna take us, plus another us, plus another us. So what I can say from it on the way Minuteman does it, not just in California, but everywhere we go, that's not our sandbox. Okay? Figure out how to play and work with the people that are there and go in there very humbly. I'm not a first responder. I'm not going to be a first responder. Mr. Fireman, what can I do to help you? You know, government agency, what can I do to help you? This is my skill set. Where can I use my skills? And how can I assist you? Go in there with your hat in your hand, I've always say, and sometimes it's going to get knocked out. But guess what? We're not here for us. We're here for that one, right? So that's what it's all about. It's about the one. I always say, when we go out, I would love to help 10,000 people. All I want to find is the first one, okay? Then I'll find the second one and the third one. So all I can say is humility. We've talked about it.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody have a lesson learned that didn't turn out so good this year? You got anything, Chris? How about a good one? Y'all, Chris Childs is, National Director over Disaster Response? Is that the title? It's towels, not title. I know, you're ready to wash the feet. But Chris Childs with God's Pit Crew, I'm telling you, every time something happens, I get a text or Dennis sends me a message or Chris says, hey, man, we got blessing buckets for anybody. You just tell us where they need to go, right? So they've got a plan. That's the initial attack, right? It's like, how do we bless them? How do we build a relationship? How do we grow? And so can you share anything from this year? You've had a pretty busy year.
We've had an extremely busy year, but I think there's two things. One is a really practical thing. We started really hitting the community group social media stuff. When we're looking for ways to help, instead of just this is us, this is who we are, is find out what are the actual needs that the community is saying we need help. So I had a team monitoring that, and we were communicating all over the country when disasters hit. What do they actually need? What are the people that have been affected? What are they asking for? And then we try to meet those needs. Yeah, the local community groups that pop up after these things hit, where the community is trying to help each other. We don't come in saying we just say, what do you need? Over and over and over and over. And then it starts to get out that these guys can meet this need. We went, and Asheville was tough when we first got there. Well, we went to Georgia. We instantly had 500 requests for help. We get to Asheville, it was hard because it was spread out. Communication was down. So we really started hitting the community groups, and instantly I had 1,000 requests for help. And they were all different. But our big thing is, how do we reach one person 1,000 times? So that was a big thing for us. And then another one, as far as the organization goes, is what did the Lord call us to? Let's do what he called us to, not everything. So we are good at a few things, and we just want to pour gas on those. And the other things, other people in this room are good at it, so let's help them do that, and we'll do what we do. So,
How many just learned something right there? Are you thinking, hey, we're going, everybody should be watching us so that we can connect with them? Or are you actually diving in and going, hey, what's the community actually talking about? That is huge. Think about that. We need a whole team. Maybe I can get Ashley and Stephanie from Colorado to help us with that one too. No. Hey, real quick, and I know y'all are going to talk back there. During Hurricane Helene, man, me and the couple of team members that we have to help kind of track things, it got out of hand. I mean, there was a lot of stuff happening, and Ashley and Stephanie just stepped up. Hey, is there anything we can do from Colorado? I'm like, yes, absolutely. And so we had this whole active event tracker spreadsheet. We're just hammering everybody's social. We're trying to figure out everything, where everybody's going. We're trying to get response notifications in. Thank you. Can we give them a round of applause? And here's the funny thing. They're like, we just don't feel like we're doing anything. But what you did made a huge, huge difference in what the whole group was able to do. So that's how family works together, right? So thank you. But that note about going in, let's study, let's figure out what the local social is talking about, that's huge. Y'all got something back there, Dennis? No? Carl, anybody back there want to any lessons learned this year? I mean, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be on this topic. He's sleeping. Just got back from, I was kidding with him, Russia or whatever. But, okay, so new connections, any new connections this year that you made and that we should invite next year, we should invite into some type of communication? Any new connections out there? Nothing. All right. What you got? Oh, perfect. Connected with us. Great.
David Smith, East Tennessee Nazarene Disaster Response. There are some secular groups, like how do you break in with those? Appalachian Service Project. What a great partner they've been for us in East Tennessee, and they have a lot of resources I didn't know about. I think they should know about us. They should know about this group right here. Because I think we have a lot we could offer them, and they have an awful lot to offer us. And then on a local level, there are organizations inside the communities, especially like where we're working now, Greene County. It's called AidNet, and all they do is provide construction equipment and warehousing just for that county. And it's a multi-million-dollar operation that a little organization like East Tennessee Nazarene Disaster Response would have no way to get, but they become our major partner to meet, rebuild at this point, rebuild 40 houses. So going in, finding those local organizations or regional state organizations have just been a powerful tool for us.
Yeah, that's huge, and I think, Topper, even going back, I mean, I love that this is a sticking point because it's important, right? What are we doing locally? Are we waiting, when the storm happens to call Chris at God's Pit Crew because we know that he may come? That's a hard thing to do, right? How are we engaging with local churches as a faith-based, disaster response ministry? Is it asking them to come in and be our volunteers, or is it coming in and saying, hey, how can we serve y'all? Nothing's happening right now, right? We've got some tools, we got some resources. Who do you know, right? And so how do you do that? How do you grow in that? What are the resources that you can pull from your local community? Because how many organizations are here, Dennis?
60 plus.
60 plus, so a little bit over 60. So that means that we all have a different community that we're from. Maybe there's offices in different areas, but we all have connections, right? And so I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what a resource page looks like, but I think it looks like your face. It looks like our relationship, right? It's like, what does it taste like? It tastes like whatever you know over there, because when it happens there, I'm calling you, Kyle. That's what it looks like. And guess what? Shane and Spokes of Hope may want to come too, because they're pretty close. And so that's kind of how we've just been working Serve Store. It's like, okay, we start drawing the lines, getting a little bit bigger, then we finally hit, Mercy Chefs and Chris and everybody else out on the outside. They're like, okay, what are y'all hearing? Is it that bad? Let's go, But Kyle at Grindstone's got to do something, right? He's got to pull together that community. I mean, Austin Disaster Relief Network, Jennifer's here. Like, they do it really well. Like, there's a rhythm of engaging the churches, supporting the churches, doing the different things, right? And I think it goes back to that, Topper, that we can't get so laser focused on the fact that we have tractors and chainsaws, right? It's the relationship.
Derick, if I can jump in. So I think there's a couple of things that we're working on here that we're navigating our way through, and guys, because this is a working meeting, don't think about this as a presentation from the front, because again, what we're doing is we're leveraging everybody's perspective to be able to create something that serves everyone at the same time. So if that makes sense. So when we talk about these connections and relationships, and those are incredible connections and relationships. I mean, I've met some guys just in the last few weeks, some really unique names. One I really like is Redneck Housing Relief. Thought that was a really cool name. Felt right at home talking with them. We sent them a load of hay up this past week with some guys that are part of our church that helped us make those connections and things like that. So what we're actually looking at in the service source world is how do we build space for that type of connection to be able to happen so that you can see it along with everybody else. Does that make sense? So this is kind of where we're at. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I'm gonna share with you, because I didn't share it in the first session, what my word was for 2024. Remember I told you I get those word out of frustration moments? Well, my word for 2024 is God doesn't have a capacity problem, he has a mobilization problem. And so the dilemma that's stuck in my head that I'm trying to navigate through and figure out is how do we, and we're gonna have a whole session on this, on engaging the church and mobilizing the masses. We'll be talking about that more. But even sitting here in this room, as we look through all of the connections and all the places. Now again, what we do inside of the DRRN, because we haven't come up with a better name yet, the DRRN network, Disaster Response Relational Network. I'll share the visions and values tomorrow. You'll understand that, why we keep this somewhat of a closed room, so to speak, because again, it has its purpose, it has its place, but we're trying to create the right kind of spaces inside of ServSource that gives us those kind of connections so that we can have and build those relationships that you may already have, but they're relationships that other people need to have also, so that we can continue to develop the network and the capacity. It doesn't mean they might necessarily find themselves needing to be in this room, but they need to be at a place where they can be connected with. Does that make sense? So our friends at Rubicon, this is not necessarily the right room for them, but there is great places for them to connect in with us and working and serving together. Does that make sense? And so we're looking for how to create those places where those other organizations and other groups can connect and have space and be able to communicate and have resource and things like that. I mean, right now, my brain is just rolling with thinking about, resources for North Carolina and what that looks like. When I was asked about hay and I pushed that out through ServSource and you guys popped up and said, hey, we'll haul it if you can find it. And then I began to ask other people, and so we began to kind of follow the leads and stuff like that. That's working, but what if we could scale that up to a higher level to where it's like we have this repository of resource all across the United States that's going on all the time, so that whenever a need comes up, it's boom, hey, I need hay. I type in the word hay and it populates here. Or I come across this and I type in this, I need building materials, or I need 2x4s, or I need plywood, or boom, it populates all these different contacts and connections and resources and things like that. And I know there are things out there that are doing some stuff like that. But again, guys, everything we're doing in this world of ServSource it's to serve you. So even when we're talking about these feedbacks and things like that, this is the kind of stuff we're looking for. We've got to know what we need to best serve you, to serve what you're finding out as an organization, to serve what's happening in your churches and things like that. And then we're about to jump into lunch in a minute, but it was something else we were talking about in the foyer. Danny and I was talking just a few minutes ago. He was asking me about other churches and partnerships and relationships. Can we tell them about this? And I'm like, if Danny's asking me that question, somebody else is asking it as well. Guys, it is a resounding yes. If you know of churches in your networks, how many work with churches? Everybody in the room. Some of us work with the same ones. Some of us work with different ones. But at the end of the day, guys, I'm telling you, it is, I don't say it because I am one, I say it because it's God's plan. It is the key to every single community. And we have to have as many of them on board, moving with us. And we're going to talk more about this in the coming sessions, but I just want you to begin to think about that now, of what that could look like, especially as it relates to this communication, connection, and creating these spaces and stuff like that. And Derick, forgive me for talking a little too much, but my brain was back there just kind of exploding for a minute as to more things we could do. So.
Well, I think this is the purpose of these workshops. This is a big workshop so that we can talk through some things. The cool thing that has happened with ServSource this year is that we've actually gotten a little bit of support, and we actually have some guys that are pretty smart working on this stuff. So if we can figure out, Dennis paints a really good picture of what it could look like, and guess what? We're moving that way. We really are. And it's a challenge. I mean, you know, I think I've told this story before, but when I met with David Burke from Team Rubicon, and what was supposed to be a 20-minute conversation turned into an hour, and when we were done, he said, "Man, I love it." He said, you have by far probably the worst platform I've ever seen." And I said, "Wow, that's quite a compliment, you know." And but he said, "But the relationships are outstanding. So whatever you do is going to work, you know? You got people that are actually playing together." And so that's the key to it. The technology can catch up. Like, I don't think God's given it to us yet because we haven't deserved what could be as far as the group. Like, as we continue to work together and build this thing, yes, we want to invite. How many churches are in America? Does anybody have that number? Like, when we looked in Austin, Texas, Jennifer, we have 200 part of the Austin Disaster Relief Network, but there's like how many churches? Over 800 churches in that Austin area. And where are they? There's 600. There's 3 more networks out there that we haven't even touched. So just think about it. And I believe it's going to be intentionality. It's going to be desperate intentionality of, we want to connect with you. We want to be able to grow with you. One of the things that we'll talk about, and I know we've been talking about it with Love Acadiana, is doing this type of roundtable in different parts of the country where we can come in and just have conversations and just offer some tools. And so a lot of that is not going to be coming in and saying, "Hey, what do y'all," we want to be able to show them something, right, that's impactful. And when I start telling people about what we do with ServSource, I'm talking about all of you. I'm just bragging on what you're doing. Guess what? We don't have a social media team, but man, I can repost like nobody's business, you know? And so to me, that's what it's all about. How do we do that? How do we support you, those who are serving communities, over and over again? And how do we build an opportunity for churches to connect with each other in communities so that whenever something does happen, it's just a natural flow like what's happening in Austin. So we'll talk more about that, but go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
So I've got 2 things I'm required to do before we take a break. One is just because I'm a dot connector. So Connie from Hope Force International was asking me a question in the break that I did not have an answer to, but the answer is always in the room. So they have a great volunteer management tool, but it doesn't communicate well with their calendar. If somebody is got a tool that's really good at that, would you connect with Connie Wave? That would make me happy. And the second thing I want to do is I want to tell you we're going to lunch.